President Trump applies some pressure on the U.S. Attorney General to silence Robert Mueller. There's agreement and inaction in what comes to what's now being called Russian information warfare. And using computers to make guns becomes the latest political hot potato as well. All things to talk about this morning with the Illinois Democratic County Chair's President Doug House and former Rock Island County Republican Party Chair Bill Bloom. Nice to see you both. Always great to see you guys, actually.
It's good to be here.
Let's start with guns and technology. A federal judge intervened this week to block a Texas company from publishing how to make guns with a 3D printer. Gun aficionados say the technology is probably not adequate to make a durable weapon. Supporters of tighter gun laws will say it would be a way to circumvent any regulations eventually. There's now a push in the United States Senate from some of them to prevent these blueprints from being published. Assuming that the technology only improves over time, how should the government handle an issue like this? What do you think, Doug?
Well, they should have some things are self-evident that there should be laws in place, and the 3D guns and production of them is one of those places. The stiff penalty should be in place. I'm a gun owner myself. I have a FOID card, and my children do, and we've all had gun hunter safety, but that's not the purpose of these guns. Therefore, purposes of taking life. And they have the possibility of getting into places where conventional guns couldn't and take life at a very high price. Officials or leaders of our country, for example, or on an aircraft. So these are things that are very concerning. They find their way to the dark web, or they're on the internet anyway, so they are concerning.
This is an area that we haven't entered before, obviously, Bill, when we talk about gun legislation and regulation. And you almost might think the gun manufacturers might not like this because it could hurt their bottom lines, right? I mean, it's a different discussion.
Well, actually, personally, I wouldn't pull the trigger on a gun made out of Lego plastic. But you know, I think it's being litigated through the courts. I think that's appropriate. It gives the government time to look at it and determine, you know, what is the level of threat. I don't think anybody in a mass shooting environment would try to use one of these because I think it would probably explode on around the second or third round. But
there's still the potential for someone to make one and do something.
Oh yeah, no, I have no problem with it being with the federal government looking at it and determining in a way that doesn't impact free speech in general, you know, what's the best way to curb something like this?
Certainly something to be following. A Senate Intelligence Committee hearing this week brought testimony from cyber security authorities. They labeled the interference by Russians and other enemies into the United States election system as information warfare. Now, I have raised this question about whether this is a form of warfare in the past on this program. The Director of National Intelligence confirmed this week that that threat has not diminished, yet there is no noticeable activity really on Capitol Hill or from the White House on this issue, other than talk, really. Why isn't there a commitment from the leadership in Congress to do something more about this? What do you think, Bill?
Well, first off, I think their goal is basically to damage, not necessarily to advance anybody, but to damage democracy in general.
Democracy and create chaos in this country.
Create doubt as far as, like, did my vote really count? There's no evidence that has ever happened in the past. You know, the federal government, again, they're taking a look at it. They're trying to come up with ways to curb it, but you know, again, you get back into free speech issues as far as
one of the issues I think that comes up, you know, it's not about if there's actually been able to change votes, but there is the issue of whether they can penetrate voter registration records and change an address somewhere, one letter here or there, and then all of a sudden you go to vote, and all of a sudden your ID doesn't match what's in the record system, and someone is being blocked from it. There's a suppression tactic that can happen in both parties potentially here, right, Doug?
Yeah,
I guess.
The potential may be there, but the thing that we're really concerned about is that this week an unprecedented effort was made by the Cabinet and Home Security and Joint Department heads to come out and talk about their focus on this effort that's taking place to undermine our elections and undermine our democracy through social media and other efforts to hack into different accounts. And that's not being led by the president, and that's very concerning that they felt compelled on their own to come out and do this, even in the shadow of the tweets where he says that it's non-existent.
Let's move to those tweets, because a couple of posts on Twitter from President Trump this week are under more scrutiny than usual this week, and they already get a lot of scrutiny, to be sure. One called for Attorney General Jeff Sessions to end Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation, said he should. You remember Sessions recused himself from the Russia investigation. The other called the prosecution of his former campaign chair Paul Manafort a hoax. Manafort's trial started this week. The New York Times reported the president crossed a line he never crossed until now by these tweets. His critics call these actions other examples of obstruction of justice. Now, have we reached the point where this activity from the president has to be reined in, and if so, how does this happen, Doug?
I'm not really sure at this point how it happens. It's unprecedented. People are coming forward within his own party, and they're calling for the process to go forward and be seen out. We have a trial that's in process, and he's interjecting himself into an ongoing trial and process that's taken place within a legal system that has served our country well. It's not, I don't feel that it's appropriate, but I'm not sure legally what recourse there is.
Republicans aren't on board with this necessarily, this type of activity. Bill, do you think there's a way to, is censuring an issue in something like this? I mean,
well, first off, you know, as Sarah Sanders pointed out, the president has a right to his own, to advance his own opinion. He hasn't done anything as far, he hasn't, I mean, if you talk about...
well, we don't see presidents interjecting themselves into a trial and making statements that can be public, and when juries are supposed to not read the media and things like that, but this isn't a sequestered jury in the Manafort case necessarily. So there's never always an assurance of this, and when a president is making these sorts of statements, that can have an influence on a jury, potentially.
Well, I guess potentially it could. I guess it all depends on who they've selected through the jury selection process. I'm not too concerned about that personally. I think you know, the Manafort, he hasn't done anything. He could have stopped the investigation. He hasn't. He has voiced his frustration, but he's also let the process continue forward. And I think the Manafort case will unfold the way it's supposed to, and then after that, we'll see where we are.
Now, there are some powerful Republicans trying to rein in the president, or at least his trade policies that they don't like. These are the billionaire Koch brothers, well-known Republican contributors over the years. They oppose the trade tariffs being imposed by the president and threaten to stop financing Republicans who don't stand up to the president on trade. In fact, they said they would even contribute to Democrats. This is a shot across the bow in Republican politics. What impact do you think this could have on the midterm election, Bill?
Well, first, if I have a world of respect for the Koch brothers, I mean...
I'm not here to criticize the Koch brothers or anything like that. I'm just saying
No,
they are a player in the American
and
political system,
they're very strong free market advocates. So I think they're a couple of great guys. You know, it's going to put candidates a little bit. They're going to have to figure out, are they going to support the president? And personally, I think the president's right in challenging China the way he is. I mean, with their control of the steel industry and the aluminum industry, we can't let them continue to dump and steal intellectual property and basically practice every form of theft that you can get away with in trade practices.
Do you expect a big influence in the midterm elections by just the actions the Koch brothers are taking?
There already has been. They committed coming into 2018 $400 million to help to impact the midterm elections, and they've spent that, and they got their big ticket item, which was they got the income tax reform, and that benefited the business community. That it didn't do anything for working men and women. There's a very short period of time.
But in terms of what it means for the Republicans that they're targeting now too, how they're going to influence it from here on out.
Well, they're absolutely players in it, with the types of resources and money that they bring to bear in it, and they're very respected within the Republican Party.
All right, we'll see what happens. Bill Bloom, Doug House, thanks so much for the insight. That does bring us to our question of the week. What role do you think the government should play when it comes to the production of 3D printed guns? Send your answer by email to fortherecord@whbf.com or respond to this post on Facebook at the Local 4 News WHBF TV page or on my page.